At 0615 hours on May 22, 2025, a U.S. Coast Guard HC-130 Ocean Sentry patrol aircraft was flying a standard maritime surveillance mission over the eastern Pacific when its radar picked up something that would soon turn into a full-blown pursuit operation. A small, fast-moving vessel had been detected 120 nautical miles southwest of Panama, moving erratically and at unusually high speed for its size. One of the many semi-submersible narco boats that the cartels use to move tons of cocaine north toward Mexico. Within minutes, the aircraft's infrared sensors locked onto the heat signature of 4 individuals on deck and a covered compartment in the center of the vessel, enough to make the crew realize this wasn't an innocent fishing trip. The aircraft relayed its position to the nearby U.S. Coast Guard cutter Monroe, a 418-foot national security cutter patrolling in the same sector as part of a joint operation with the Drug Enforcement Administration. At 0628, the Monroe's Combat Information Center confirmed the contact and initiated intercept procedures. The cutter accelerated to 28 knots, its twin LM-2500 turbines roaring as the crew scrambled to stations. On board, a helicopter crew from the HITRON Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron was already preparing their MH-65 Dolphin for launch. The plan was simple: identify, warn, and, if necessary, disable the suspect vessel before it could scuttle its cargo or escape into international waters. By 0642, the Dolphin was airborne, armed with a .50 caliber precision rifle and a crew trained specifically for drug smuggling interdiction. The small narco boat, known as a low-profile vessel, was painted ocean blue and had a radar cross-section so small it almost disappeared into the waves. But its infrared signature betrayed it. From the Dolphin's FLIR camera, the crew could clearly see heat emanating from its diesel engine, and the 4 men on board, one of whom was pouring something overboard, likely fuel to lighten the load and increase speed. The helicopter issued a radio call in both Spanish and English ordering the vessel to stop. There was no response. The pilot descended to 50 feet above the surface, giving the crew a clear view of the smugglers, who instead of complying, began throwing packages wrapped in plastic into the sea. At 0650, the Dolphin opened warning fire. 3 bursts from the M240 machine gun across the bow. Still, the smugglers refused to stop. That's when the precision shooter took over. Using armor-piercing rounds, he aimed directly at the boat's outboard engines. The first shot missed. The second found its mark, sending up a burst of smoke and steam as one of the engines failed. The boat slowed but continued forward with the remaining engines. It was now a race between the smugglers trying to dump their cargo and the Americans trying to capture evidence before it sank. Meanwhile, 15 miles behind, the cutter Monroe launched 2 ribs, rigid-hull inflatable boats, each carrying a boarding team in tactical gear. These small craft, powered by twin 250-horsepower outboards, could skim over the water at nearly 40 knots. Within minutes, they closed in on the target. The Dolphin maintained overhead surveillance, feeding live video to the Monroe's operations center. Every move was recorded. The smugglers were desperate. One man was seen with a fuel can, possibly preparing to set the vessel ablaze. That would not happen. At 0701, one of the ribs came within hailing distance. A loudspeaker blared. "Detenga su barco inmediatamente." Still no compliance. The team leader gave the order. A Coast Guard gunner fired 2 disabling shots into the second engine. The vessel lost power completely, drifting helplessly. Boarding began immediately. The smugglers tried to resist, but a flashbang tossed onto the deck ended their defiance. Within seconds, the Coast Guardsmen had control. 4 suspects were detained, the boat secured, and the operation moved into evidence recovery. The packages thrown overboard were marked with GPS buoys by the Dolphin crew and later retrieved by another RHIB. Each one contained roughly 25 kilograms of high-purity cocaine, street value exceeding $50 million. As the boarding party secured the suspects, they discovered something more concerning. Beneath the deck was a network of tubes and a semi-sealed compartment, a sign that this boat had been built for stealth runs under the radar. The design bore similarities to Cartel engineering traced to Colombia's Pacific coast, where smugglers had perfected the art of semi-submersible construction. Intelligence analysts aboard the Monroe concluded that this was part of a new trafficking corridor developed after previous routes through Central America had been shut down. At 0725, the cutter's small boats towed the disabled narco vessel toward the Monroe for processing. Overhead, The Dolphin continued surveillance, scanning for any secondary contacts, cartel escort boats or decoys that sometimes followed such operations. The sky remained clear, but then, at 0741, radar detected a faint echo 18 nautical miles north, possibly another fast-moving contact. The Monroe altered course to intercept. The crew knew the cartels often used multiple vessels to scatter Coast Guard resources, a tactic known as bait and switch. As the cutter closed in, the contact disappeared from radar, only to reappear moments later, low, fast, and almost invisible. The CIC confirmed it wasn't a fishing vessel. The heat signature suggested a second low-profile craft. The Dolphin, low on fuel, returned to the Monroe for a quick refuel and relaunch. Within 10 minutes, it was airborne again, heading straight toward the radar contact. What it found was another semi-submersible, smaller than the first, partially awash and likely unmanned. The crew suspected it had been scuttled intentionally. Using a rescue swimmer, they secured a tow line and began recovery. Inside, investigators later found traces of cocaine residue and navigation systems pre-programmed with routes to the Mexican coast, evidence of cartel coordination on an industrial scale. By 0820 hours, both targets were secured, and the operation was classified as a major interdiction success. But for the Coast Guard, this was just another day in the Eastern Pacific, one of the busiest smuggling corridors on Earth. Every year, hundreds of semi-submersibles, go-fast boats, and fishing trawlers attempt to move narcotics north. For every one intercepted, several more slip through, a reminder of how vast the ocean truly is. Yet the Monroe's success that morning sent a clear message. Even in the open sea, the U.S. Coast Guard was watching. Back on the cutter, the detainees sat handcuffed under guard as technicians photographed and cataloged every piece of evidence. The crew worked in methodical silence, aware that each operation like this provided intelligence that would shape the next mission. The coordinates, fuel type, and engine serial numbers all pointed back to a single manufacturer in Tamacau, Colombia, a major cartel shipyard. The DEA liaison aboard immediately relayed this information to headquarters. By 0900 hours, the Dolphin returned to base after logging 3 hours of flight time. Its gunner inspected the .50 cal rifle, its barrel still warm from use. The footage captured by the FLIR camera would later become part of the official after-action review and training material, real evidence of precision interdiction at sea. On board Monroe, the crew gathered on deck as the captain commended the boarding team. Their professionalism had turned what could have been a dangerous confrontation into a textbook capture. What made this operation extraordinary wasn't just the speed or precision. It was the seamless integration of air, sea, and intelligence assets across agencies. The Coast Guard, DEA, and even satellite surveillance from the Department of Defense had contributed to tracking the smugglers' network. Analysts later discovered that the intercepted boats were part of a larger convoy. 2 other semi-submersibles had departed Colombia days earlier, heading west toward the Galapagos Islands to test new routes. This meant the cartels were innovating faster than ever, and U.S. forces had to adapt accordingly. By late afternoon, the seized drugs were transferred to a secure storage facility aboard Monroe, and the detainees were scheduled for transfer to federal custody in Panama City. As the sun set, the ship's radar swept the calm waters, each ping a reminder of the endless cat-and-mouse game playing out every day across the Pacific. For every smuggler thinking they could outsmart the Coast Guard, there was a Dolphin in the sky and a cutter on the horizon ready to prove them wrong. When the operation report reached Washington, it became part of a larger briefing on transnational criminal networks. It highlighted how new technology, infrared tracking, precision disabling fire, and real-time data sharing had made the Coast Guard a frontline combat force in the war on narcotics. The success of Monroe's crew was cited as an example of modern maritime interdiction at its finest. Fast, coordinated, and decisive. As night fell over the Pacific, the ocean was calm once more. The smuggler's boat, now stripped of evidence, was set adrift to be sunk later, during live-fire training. The men who had tried to outrun the Coast Guard sat in a detention cell, awaiting extradition. Their journey north had lasted barely 10 hours. Their next one, to an American courtroom, would last far longer. The ocean, vast and merciless, had once again chosen its side.